Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Faitheism Project podcast. I'm Alan Katz, and I have always been grateful to Hebrew School for helping to make me the atheist that I am today.
And my name is Randy Lovejoy, and I am a pastor who is outside of the institutional church for the sake of helping people go deeper in their Christian faith. And it is good to be with you, as always, Alan.
Pleasure. It's mutual.
Yes.
Today we'll cut right to the chase. We're go a little wow. We're asking the question: is God consciousness, with quotation marks, or is consciousness, in quotation marks, God?
Is this a chicken and the egg thing, or is this? We'll see. We got to explore this. I think that is a very intriguing question.
It all comes down to, I guess, what we're considering our consciousness, our conscience, and that voice in our heads. I may lose my internet connection here and there, so if for some reason, I'll just warn you in advance. It's been that kind of a day, but I just saw something flash on my screen.
A little slow every once in a while. I was just checking to see if it was my computer or what.
No. It's our connection's been odd all day, so
okay. No worries.
I'll do some nipping and tucking here. It all comes down to it's a question of what is consciousness, and that the voice inside your head or voices, the ones that guide you, that you think of as you, some of them, but then, all right, there are people who hear the voice of God. And my question is, having never heard this voice, does this voice stand apart from your consciousness and from your conscience? Or are they melded in some fashion?
Even saying hearing the voice of God in itself is an interesting phrase, because it's like, what does that mean? I mean, does it mean that like you hear God through your ears? Is that what we're talking about? Does it mean?
How are you perceiving the communication from this being?
Right, because I would say in my experience, which is really what I can speak to, I suppose, but in my experience, it's much more of an external influencing than an internal voice. And
so God's voice is something outside of you. So it is a separate thing from your conscience, from your conscience and your consciousness.
Yeah, I feel like I definitely have a distinction between those two. And let me give you, I mean, this is something that's very tangible, that I think is something that most Christians through history have experienced, or would call it. That is that, like, when you read the Bible, it's not just the Bible on the page, but when your consciousness and the Bible are interacting, that there's a sense that there's some direction or guidance from another being, which, even as I say that, sounds bizarre. So I'm not sure how I would describe it. But, it's what I found, though, is when I'm reading, like if I read a passage of the Bible, it doesn't have the same impact as if I'm reading Dune, All right. So I'm reading Dune. I want to get into the story. And it definitely, like any good story does, it can take me away in its story world.
Well, let's put it this way: the voice of the author of Dune, what's his name?
Herbert. Herbert, was it Frank Herbert?
Yeah. I mean, okay. So in essence, you hear his voice,
right?
As the author. Now, with the text of the Old or the New Testament, you are still hearing an author's voice there on the page.
Yeah, but it has another dimension. I mean that's
but okay, I'm willing to follow you there, and so that
is very brave of you.
But it might be, yes, the scribe who's doing the actual scribbling. But all right, part of what you're saying is that this is the voice of God onto the page, and that is what you feel.
It's this interaction. I mean, the way traditional Christian theology talks about it is it's the Holy Spirit working with the scriptures to give us guidance and direction in our lives. But what it feels like is, for example, I could take a chapter from Proverbs, for example, right? And I'd read it one day and a certain verse would jump out at me. I'd read it a year later and that verse wouldn't jump out at me at all. Another one would. But then on top of that, it's like oftentimes that verse is actually relevant to what happens during that day. So there's an interactiveness, and it's integrated with trying to live out what you believe in your life, that all kind of happens there. That it's not a voice. It's not like, hey, Randy, you need to check out verse 3. It's more like, whoa, this one kind of jumped out. Why did that jump out at me? How does that seem relevant? So it's more of an interactive kind of interplay.
You are describing to a degree what a conscience feels like.
Well, that's the thing. It's
so in a sense, what you're describing is that if one follows this way of life and one takes these words into your heart a little bit deeper, then authoritative.
I mean, that's the difference between Dune and the Bible to me. Dune's fun. The Bible has some authority over how I should live my life. I'm not going to live my life according to Dune. Now,
all right, let's ask this question. Okay, why are you giving the Bible the authority,
right,
that you're not giving to Dune?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. I haven't actually reflected on it exactly in that way.
All right, so where's the authority? Where as you read that book, you are imbuing it with an awful lot of supernatural power.
But it's not. And here's one distinction. Some people act like the Bible itself is like, you've got to be careful with the sheets of paper and don't write in it and all of that. That's not the authority that it's being, because again, it's a text that allows an interaction between my conscience and what I would say is the Holy Spirit working in me through that passage. So, but it's not the passage itself. I mean, it could be written on a stone or on a piece of paper. It could be in crumpled paper. It could be handwritten. It's not like
you would think that the message is powerful enough to transcend its medium.
Yeah, and it's just some people treat the Bible, the physical Bible, as if it's this holy relic in itself, and that's what I'm trying to move away from. It's not that. It's that there's something about that portion of the book that enables me to move forward in my experience with God.
I feel the same way. There are people who will not write the word, they will not spell out the word God, capital G-O-D. They'll do capital G-D. Because you shouldn't say the name. You shouldn't speak the name,
Right.
the name of the Lord in vain. Well, the Lord's name ain't God. God
Right.
is the deity's job description. The name is Yahweh,
Right.
originally El, but Yahweh is actually, what does Yahweh do for a living? Oh, he's a god. But
Yeah.
it's funny how
yeah.
yeah, no,
Right.
no,
People get delicate about, I think,
the wrong things.
the wrong things. I think it shows a misunderstanding. And I think the other thing is when, and this is the other abuse that people see, when there are certain personalities in the religious world that have fused their own conscience and God's conscience, and it's automatically the same thing, or their own experience and God's activity are the same thing. I remember a guy that was told the story of how there was a hurricane that came through his town, and he prayed as he was up against a tree in his yard, and it missed his yard and wiped out all his neighbors. Isn't God good? And you're kind of sitting there like, shouldn't you have been like praying protection for your neighbors? But it's like this guy he totally missed that. And that's where I think people's conscience and their sense of God get fused in a way that's actually antithetical to the whole experience.
Sort of kind of dangerous too, don't you?
Well, it is.
Can be.
It's incredibly dangerous, and eventually they're always wrong at some point. But what's great is that there are a number of people that you can go back and look at how many times they were wrong, but they always tend to forget about that and prognosticate on yet another thing. And you're like, yeah, but what about the 10 other times you were wrong with it? Oh no, but this is it. This is what God says. And it's like, okay, glad you haven't learned your lesson,
Yeah.
So I would see, number one, I would definitely have a clearer distinction between my own conscience and between what I perceive as being, I would, rather than a voice, I'd say it's more like a leading, a nudging, a pushing. I don't know. People use all sorts of language, but it's feeling like, oh, this, I think I need to do this, or I think this is important, or I think I need to do that. So my conscience is still working, but I try really hard to distinguish between that and me saying, wow, I think God really wants me to have an amazing chocolate almond croissant daily. It's kind of, okay, I think at that point you've fused you're getting confused here.
To revisit the guy you were just talking about who prayed for his yard to get saved from the storm that devastated everyone else. I've blogged about the dangers of monotheism.
Yeah.
And one of the problems that monotheism presents is that if you believe ardently in God and you put the voice of God inside your head, and you insist, as some people do, I talk to God all the time, and of course, first of all, you're taking the place that the creator of the entire universe has a very personal relationship with me. He talks to me. Now, he doesn't talk to the rest of you, because you're not as special as me.
Right.
But I'm special, so therefore he talks to me. I understand the creator of everything, whereas you do not.
Right.
This then can become kind of treacherous, because really they end up fusing themselves with God. And at the end of the day, they're not talking about God. They're really talking about themselves. I'm convinced that most televangelists, for instance, I don't believe for 2 seconds that they believe in God. I believe they are God.
Yeah.
If you watch Kenneth Copeland defending himself about why he has to fly in a private plane versus why he can't fly commercial, and you look at this guy, Kenneth Copeland thinks he's God.
Yeah, no, and I think that's when if you have success in certain types of Christian ministry, it tends to.
Does Joel Osteen think he's God?
I don't know.
Boy,
He's I don't know the guy
enough
well
to be God, isn't he?
But I can tell you this, that Billy Graham could have thought he was God. One of the things I really respect him for, though, was early on he had a committee that would decide on his salary, on all sorts of things. He couldn't do it on his own. And number two was that he could never stay alone in a hotel room, just because he knew himself. And he's like, all right, I do not want to be tempted by, I'm going to start getting massive salaries, and I don't want to be tempted when I'm alone on the road without my family. So there's always going to be somebody else that's there, and to me, that kept him from some of the problems that these other people have, because if there's no, we see that with anybody, maybe even with Putin, if there's no accountability, there's no end to what you can believe about yourself and your destiny and what you want to be.
Unless you're Jesus, you're probably going to abuse everything, right?
Yeah, and I think that's where, to me, the language of talking with God, I'm not sure that's the right language that Christians should be using, because it kind of reinforces the ideas like you're talking about. But if it was more like, even if it was just as simple as saying I'm praying to God, to me that changes it from I'm talking to God. It's.
Well, let me ask this question. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So you, with all good, genuine intent, you sit down and you pray to God. Okay. So in a basic prayer to God, this is now your side of this conversation.
Sure.
What would you ask for?
One of the powerful prayers in the New Testament is often called the Lord's Prayer.
I'm
that's
sure he's heard it 1,000 times, right?
He has, but I think a lot of it
knows it already. So he has. Okay, you're using the Lord's Prayer. Okay, what do you really want? Because really, you're using the Lord's Prayer, but you're not doing the. Okay, that's the smoke up the divine backside. Okay,
but no, it's actually.
What do you want?
It's like the Lord's Prayer is like a workout regimen. It's like, I've already done push-ups, so I don't need to do any more push-ups. No, actually, you do need to do push-ups on a regular basis.
But why are you doing the push-ups? What do you?
Right.
What's the body beautiful? For whose benefit is this?
Yes, to be centered on God rather than on me. Because, and this goes right to the heart to me, if I'm going to love my neighbor as myself, I actually have to have a source outside of me to help me to do that. Because otherwise, it's always about me. It's not love my neighbor as myself. It's get my neighbors to love me, more. And to me, I have to have a connection outside of me to be able to, in a really, truly self-sacrificial way, care about other people on a regular basis as a way of life. And so to me, that's, prayer. I would say, if I had to just ball it all up into one answer, I'd say prayer to me is getting my head on straight about who I am and who God is and what my place is in the world.
In essence, in prayer, one is not asking for anything. It is simply all right. So
you can definitely ask for things as well. I think that's that's something that is
most prayer. I'm just an outsider.
Go for it.
I've never prayed for anything in my entire life.
Yeah,
but my perception is that most people, when they kneel to pray, there's a mission. And if the prayer gets answered, then it's mission accomplished.
I think that's a starting place for a lot of people in prayer. I even, I think when our kids were really little, they'd lose something and Cheryl would pray with them and they'd find it. And,
Pinch out.
But the interesting thing was that planted in them the idea of prayer, not as only being that, but it was kind of like the seed that then developed into, oh, this like life's an interactive journey, and I can pray to this other being as I go through life about things.
One could pray for help to find, and that then really could be the same as just, well, think a little bit harder. And the you thinking a little bit harder, you could certainly say, well, that was the divine doing it. And sure, because I went and I revisited my thoughts as the divine instructed me to do, I suddenly remembered where I put my car keys. They were in my pocket.
Yeah, no, and I think that's always, that's one of the possibilities that's always out there with prayer is, I think there have been some studies that have shown psychological changes in people that pray regularly. And I have to go back and look. But what is actually going on is it's certainly something that you can't, I don't think there's going to be any data that's going to be able to separate those things out. However, I do think, lots of people, and this isn't just Christians, but lots of humans have found benefit from prayer. But again, I think there is a distinction between just praying for things for me. And what I like about the Lord's Prayer is it starts off as Our Father who art in heaven in English. Hallowed be thy name. And the beginning of it there, the idea is that gets you off of you. You start with something more than you. So I would say the exercise of the Lord's Prayer would be a really good thing for some of these people that, shall we say, have too much of an interest in themselves, because it's kind of like this practice of it's not about me. It's not about me.
What you have continued to describe, it seems to me, is consciousness. Is consciousness and conscience where they bind together. That you have integrated not just the idea of the deity, but of God, but God's rules, the ideas that he wants you to have inside your head as you have this relationship with him. It's like the guidebook, the owner's manual to I think be a follower of God.
I think that's fair if it's within a relationship. The reason, what worries me about saying the rules is that I think one of the ways that churches and leaders and Christians become abusive is when their faith is just about following a series of propositional truth statements. That removes it from the relational component, which I think is essential if people are going to actually become better people through Christianity. If it's purely a legalistic or law-based approach in Christianity, it doesn't go well for them or anybody else that's related to them. It's kind of like this. We were talking about an exorcism prayer, that's used on kids coming in from one parent, in a divorce situation. This prayer is starting to be used as if it's a lucky charm, that if we just say these words, then we're okay. It's removed from any kind of active, interactive, organic relationship. And when that happens, that's when Christianity gets really weird and dysfunctional. And so, I know it can also get weird in terms of on the, hey, God and I talk together and we're like this. But the other side of it is if it's Christianity is this set of rules that you must follow. If you don't, God is going to, get you. then it really messes up the whole process of becoming a better person as a Christian. So
it certainly seems like the easiest, well, God is consciousness is the ideal way, if you're going to come from this position, that you imbue as much of God inside your head, so you never have to go, well, I have a relationship with him. I have this relationship. You have it without having to show it, because it's already inside your head. You don't have to demonstrate it. I guess what I'm going for is that coming from the flip, as I do, from the flip position where consciousness is, I would describe the way that I see it as, consciousness is a metaphorical small g God, which is not unrelated.
Is it you that's the small g God that's the consciousness? Or, I mean, how do you?
Yes. We are all our own gods inside our own consciousness.
So in the sense, and you're using God in the sense of your consciousness tells you what you should do, shouldn't do, right, wrong, that sort of thing? Or
this is the structure, the structure of my moral universe. And I have a very moral universe. Mm-hmm. Well, okay, what regulates that? And I have a moral conscience. Mm-hmm. Now, mine is tied to my culture. It's tied very, very strongly and deeply to my Jewish culture. Though I do not practice the religion, as we've talked about in these podcasts, the religion is kind of a subset of the culture. The culture is big. The religion is just a teeny piece of it. And the culture, to be fair, the culture flowed originally from the religion. And one of the things that flowed into the culture from the religion at the start is the idea of tikkun olam, that your obligation being here as a human on the planet is to make the planet better for having been here. Mm-hmm. How you do that is entirely up to you. It's your obligation. Figure it out and go do. That is what informs my conscience. As I put my feet on the floor every morning to start the day, part of the unspoken intention is, and how are you going to make the world a better place today, Ace? This is my conscience, but it is also part of the voice inside my head, the voices. Mm-hmm. Voices. If there were just one voice, wouldn't that be sweet?
Yeah.
The sideshow inside my head.
I totally get that. I guess, my experience would be that all of that is there for me as well. But I would say that there's another presence that can be invited into that conversation of my conscience, that's not dependent upon me. And that's a critical point. It's not me, not dependent upon me. It is an other voice that will suggest things that I can either do or not do. I can not listen or not, that's not the right word. I can not follow the advice of this other voice because I want to follow my conscience. Or I can.
Can you tune out God's voice?
Yeah, I'd say you can. I'd say it's all too easy to do that. And I think that's a problem too, is a lot of people think they're hearing God's voice, but over time, you're kind of like, not sure that was God's voice. I think that was some other voice. I don't know what.
Would you say you've ever yourself heard God's voice?
No, the closest, remind me, I'm getting old as you are, but I'm getting old too. So remind me if I've already told the story of me on the beach on an island in Honduras, lifting Cheryl up to God. Did I say?
No, I don't think you've told that story. It was another beach on another. That's
right. No, I have a number of beaches are one of my happy places. So And beach, last time I saw you physically present, and that made it a happy place too. So anyway, moving on. So I was on this island in Honduras, and I lost 30 pounds while I was there. It was deforested. It was a very
without
tough
trees,
place.
right? The one without trees.
Yes, exactly.
I remember that.
So at the same time, right before getting there, 18 of us were in a VW van driving from Mexico City to Tegucigalpa, Honduras. So you could guess it was 2 VW vans, 18 of us. We all got to know each other really well. So by the time we got to Honduras, we then went into different locations around there to support existing churches in different places. But Cheryl and I, we developed a relationship while we were translating for a medical and dental team from the US. I also translated for a psychotherapist, and I would just not recommend that to people if you don't want some, it was some scary stuff that came out of those sessions that I was translating. But anyway, moving on. So we got to know each other there. I told her at one point, hey, if we weren't out in the middle of nowhere, where we were in a village that was, for even a Honduran, the village would be in an obscure location. I said, if we were anywhere else, I'd probably ask you out to dinner at this point. But, so by the time I got to my island, Cheryl was off on the border of Nicaragua during the whole Iran-Contra thing. So she was in an interesting place too. But I was on my island, and I just felt like, all right, this is a possible relationship here. But I came to Latin America. I told everybody, I'm not here to date or get married. I'm here for God. That was kind of more like I was telling me that. But anyway, because I wanted to be
Did
married.
that happen a lot? Did people actually, I guess they came out of this with relationships, right?
Oh, yeah. The funny thing was the head of the organization we were with was super anti anybody, starting a relationship. But once Cheryl and I got serious, he called us into the office and showed us this file he had of all the couples who had married after meeting on Spearhead. So he was on the out. He was acting like he was very fierce, but he was not. But anyway, when I was on this island, I felt like I prayed regularly on the island. It was one of the hardest places I've ever lived for multiple reasons. But I was praying on this beach, and I just felt like, this relationship could be a good thing. My parents have been divorced, though. I've seen all sorts of horrible relationships. I want to make sure it's the right thing. So this isn't typical for me in prayer, but I just said, hey, Lord, I want to just lift up the relationship with Cheryl to you, and just kind of did it this way. And again, this is highly unusual for me, but the vision took off. It was like I wasn't controlling it anymore once I did that. And it's like this gift that was Cheryl went up into the heavens and then came back down to me. And I didn't hear this audibly, but it went into my head fully formed. Why are you giving her to me? I gave her to you. And to me, that's the closest I've come. I wouldn't say I didn't hear anything, but the words
question
were
occurred inside your head. Those words, why are you giving her to me? I gave her to you. Those words occurred inside your head.
And it wasn't that I was sitting there thinking that. It was like it took off on its own. I wasn't expecting it, thinking it, prodding it, trying, it just like happened. And I'm like, okay, I got my answer. I'm good to go. And one other one, just while I'm on the beach, because I don't know, I had multiple kind of freaky experiences in Honduras that are highly unusual for me. But another one was I was on the beach, and I really felt like another one of these voices that said, so if I ask you to stay here the rest of your life, will you do that? And you talk about terror entering my soul, because, I was early 20s. this was a really poor island. It was a really hard place. I mean, I would walk from one village to another and it felt like I was walking in a tumble dryer. You know, it was just so hot and the wind was hot and everybody was really poor and it was really hard, you know, and we'd celebrate when we got to eat an iguana, you know, that, oh, we got meat, no more beans and moldy bread, we get iguana, you know. So it's just a very tough place to live. So the idea of giving that up was big, but I felt like that challenge was laid before me. And there was, you know, a regular breeze.
It was not in your mind. It was not you.
No, it felt like it came out of the blue. I was just like, wait, what? You know, the wind that was regularly blowing on the beach stopped. Here's the weird part. So the wind stopped. And then I was like really struggling with it because I felt like, oh my gosh, if I say this, then I've got to like follow through on this thing. So I finally said, all right, if that's what I'm supposed to do, I guess I'll do that. I'll give up, you know, the things in the US I enjoyed. It'd probably mean the end of the relationship with Cheryl, you know, all of that. Because she came to visit us once and they served a special stew when she visited. And we were all eating and we weren't telling her what it was, but she finally pulled out a bone and she's like, this is not a chicken bone. What is this? And that's when I said, oh, it's iguana. And she was like sick for the next 24 hours. We weren't. I don't know if we have cast iron stomachs or anything. But anyway, I doubted that she would want to join me on this island. But the weird part was when I said yes, there was this burst of wind that came from one side, blew across to the other side. And like I got chill bumps and then it was silent again. And, you know, say what you want. I don't know what it was. All I know is that happened. That was an experience. And again, it was a significant one. You know, it wasn't hokey like, oh God, give me a parking place, you know, because I'm at the mall and I can't find a parking. It was more like really significant moments because that was a key moment for me as someone who wants to follow Jesus, where I was kind of saying, okay, I'll stay. What at the time to me, I'm sure not to the people that live there, but to me seemed like the worst case scenario, and be willing to say yes. And then the other was this relationship that, you know, has become central to my life. So in those situations, I would say that's where it was an experience. There was other physical signs like the wind and stuff that I don't know how to explain it. And there was just formed sentences that just kind of felt like they burst into my consciousness from outside, I guess. So I guess that's what I'd call that. That's the closest I think I've gotten to, you know, any kind of voice. Other than that, it's more like on a daily basis, just trying to be aware. You know, there were times at Silver Lake Church where I'd be walking back from the coffee table. You remember that place before they shut it down? I'd be walking back from there and I just kind of feel like, I think I'm supposed to go talk to these people. And I just go say, hey, I'm the pastor nearby. Is there any way I could help? You know, and sometimes it would actually be opportune, you know, as an opportune moment. What was that? Well, you know, I'm sure there are ways you could figure out maybe that was some other layer of consciousness that kind of had a sense that the people were in need. But you know, that to me, I have a religious language that can define that in a way that's humble, not in a way that's weird, you know, like as in, hey, look at how awesome I am. God talks to me and I tell everybody else what to do. You know, that kind of.
The thing about consciousness, first of all, we don't really know what it is.
Exactly. So, you know,
problem number one in terms of really
right.
just
right.
We know what it isn't. Dead. Right. Okay, if you're dead, you don't have consciousness. All right, you're not capable of pulling off the magic trick that the rest of us are pulling off.
Right. Right.
But as for how we're pulling off this magic trick, you know, actually we're not entirely sure.
Well, and the other part of that is, where does it go when we die? Does it not go anywhere, which is possible, or does it go somewhere, which is what other people have thought? Well, who knows? We can't, measure that somehow.
The reason I think of consciousness as being like a small g God.
Yeah.
In that it rules everything inside. My consciousness is everything inside my head. It is why I create. My consciousness is also why I experience terrible darkness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's not that my consciousness, I was not in the grips of a devil. I was in the grips of a piece of painful history, personal history. That's what had me.
Of kind of, am I right in saying like a hidden and unhealed wound?
Absolutely. A truly a psychic wound.
Yep.
A wound to my conscious and my consciousness, my consciousness.
Yep.
And because I had not dealt with it, it was dealing with me.
Right.
In its own way. And like a kind of thought cancer is how I think of my depression. It was metastasizing.
Right.
And slowly convincing me that I didn't deserve to be here. I shouldn't be here. It would be better if I wasn't here. Well, who's telling me these things?
Right.
Me.
Right.
Me. I was telling me these things,
Did it sound like did it hit you like it was you?
No, it was totally me. It was nothing but me.
But I mean, okay, so you knew it was you before you dove into it and did some therapy and that sort of thing. It was kind of Alan saying this to Alan.
Yes. Yeah. These are all, all the voices in my head. I'll take full credit for them. They all seem to have my DNA stamped on them.
Right. But I think like creativity is another, is kind of the more positive side of all of that, of those voices, is that there are these creative ideas that I think a lot of creatives experience. It's like, where did that come from? It's a great idea. I guess it was in there somewhere or something, but it almost, some of those ideas just pop out fully formed, and it's like, wow, isn't that interesting how consciousness can work in that way as well?
It is the thing that it's inexplicable to me. Part of my working process and being fully aware of how my consciousness and my conscience, but my consciousness works. I know if I'm working on a script and whatever I'm going to do the next day, I will begin to think about the night before. It's like I'm programming it into my head.
Yeah.
And it goes into the background. I wake up the next morning and it's pretty much standard operating procedure that I'm just going to type it out now. I dealt with it in the background. That somewhere one of the voices in my head. It's like the story about the elves and the shoemaker. The little shoemaker elves inside my head are always at work.
Good.
Always at work.
Right.
Except for the 5 hours a night when I sleep.
Right.
And then it's complete. And I don't even dream. I get so zonked when I get to sleep. I cannot tell you the last time I dreamt. It has been a decade.
Wow.
Since I cannot, I simply do not dream anymore. When I get to that point, all the voices in my head, man, they clock out. They punch out of the clock. It is nobody home for that couple of hours.
So it strikes me that there's a parallel with this conversation and with our conversation just about wonder and awe.
Sure.
Because there's this experience we both talked about where we feel kind of drawn out of ourselves into, to see the wonder of the universe, for example.
Sure.
But I think, and tell me if I'm wrong, but what I think that the difference is that for you, that is a personal experience.
Yes.
As is your conscience.
Yes.
Whereas for me, there's a personal experience, but there's a sense that there's another being on the
Yes.
end of that experience.
Yes. Yes.
And that's really, I think that's the difference is whether consciousness is really just, well, I don't know if you'd say this, but really an individual experience, or whether consciousness is something that can move beyond the individual.
Well, yes, I would say consciousness for me is an entirely individual experience.
Okay.
I guess I'm wondering, is consciousness for you in partially an individual experience, but also partially in your mind a vessel that God uses to imbue himself upon your life?
Yeah, the vessel one is, I'm thinking about that word, but I would definitely say, it's still.
Well, does in essence, you want God to fill you up? Yeah.
Yes, I think, but to me, I'm trying to be exact in this because I think there's a lot of
it's very tricky
odd ways people use language on this.
Yeah.
I definitely have my own conscience that is separate from my faith. It is because I'm a human. I have that. And one of the things I love about Judaism and Christianity is there's this recognition that we have free will. And I think those are directly related. Each person has the ability to make decisions for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so faith to me does not erase that. Faith acknowledges that. And I think where, again, at least some of the really negative examples of Christianity are where it's kind of like faith is used to negate free will. It's like suddenly there is this God and you have no will. And it's like,
you want your faith to reward your free will.
Yeah. And
you want your free will to reward your faith. You kind of want them to work a little bit more harmoniously, right?
Right. And to me, the idea is that it's kind of like I am one little individual on this planet, much less one little individual in this cosmos, much less one little individual in whatever's outside of the cosmos, if there's anything, or not, or I don't know. But to me, my faith says, yes, I'm one little individual with my own conscience and decisions and responsibilities, but I get to participate in a story that's a lot bigger than me, with kind of the storyteller or the one that drives the story or something. And I get to participate with that. Now, the role that I play, I am offered a role that would create good in the story, or I can reject that offer but still play a role in the story. It's just I'd be more the negative part of the story rather than doing, making good happen in the world. And so, for example, Putin has been on a long path in which he is clearly playing the role of the villain in the story. He can proclaim whatever he wants to proclaim, but I think it's pretty clear to everybody except maybe him and maybe a few of the oligarchs that seem to keep him afloat that he's playing the villain. But I would say that
Putin has a conscience. Well, he's got a consciousness, but God, does he have a conscience?
Yeah, well, I think that's where there's a great passage that people get really freaked out about in the Old Testament where it says that God hardened Pharaoh's heart because people worry about, well, didn't he have free will and blah blah. To me that's a non-issue. I think that what's trying to be said there is what I think there were times where Putin could have made alternate choices. Where he even had the opportunity to make a different choice, but he chose to go down a path that at this point he can't make a good choice. he's given that up. That habit's gone.
I suspect that Vladimir Putin is one of those monotheists who's crossed the line into thinking he is God.
Yeah, I have a very tough time believing that his faith is in any way sincere. Maybe it is.
I am not one to question anyone's religious faith. That is, hey, if you say you believe, who am I to say you don't?
Well, except, I mean, to me, and this is another thing I appreciate about the Old Testament is this: every one of the heroes has a major flaw, at least one. So there's this recognition that we are not God, but at the same time, it's also very clear who are the people that say that they believe but don't, and who are the people that that actually do believe, and you just see it in their life. You see it in the fruit of their lives. All you got to do is look at how's their life going. If their life's a train wreck or it's just killing a bunch of other people, then clearly they do not believe what if they're saying they're a part of this story. Clearly they don't believe what they say they believe. But if their life actually shows signs of some of these things, then they do. And again, I don't like taking the role of judge, but at the same time, I do want to, I feel like as a leader, a Christian leader, I want to defend, not that God needs me to defend, God at all, but I want to defend God from there again, back to the Lord's Prayer, that hallowed be thy name. What that is may your name be glorified. May people say, wow, you're amazing, God. You are wonderful. And to me, if anybody's going to pray that prayer, then they need to live a life that isn't throwing, God's image into the dust heap, and that's whether it's Putin or religious leaders that have these huge falls. It's like all of that is counter to what this should all be about, because regardless of our take on consciousness, I think we could probably both agree that if you're going to say that you're connected to God, then you dang well better live a life that is better than people that don't, if you're going to say it. Otherwise, shut up and sit down. I don't know, but
in my experience as someone who has never believed in God or any God, it's a slippery slope.
Oh, it is,
because everyone's God is kind of their God.
Yeah,
it's kind of formed inside their heads, and it's formed by their perceptions. And so in a way, that is the nature of monotheism. If you've got the idea of God inside your head, it's not going to be exactly like anyone else's. It will be colored in some teeny weeny small way by you, brought them in, your personality, your understanding of even the words that are used to describe God and your relationship with God. You will interpret them how you will interpret them. And depending upon, hey, were you brought into this conversation as a Jewish person, as a Catholic person, as a Muslim, too will color all the ways that you understand what God is.
Even language. I mean, because, we now
I'm going to draw a parallel here, because in essence, this is why to me, in essence, all right, God is consciousness, but consciousness is a kind of God. In a sense, in that we don't know how, we know how powerful our consciousness can be.
Yeah.
It does inexplicable things sometimes that we can't figure out. Hey, look, we only see visible light. We don't see X-rays or gamma rays, all kinds of light. That information contained in that light flies by us 24/7. We're oblivious. Sounds, smells, tastes, we are oblivious of tons and tons of information. It would not be surprising that a thing as complicated as consciousness. I mean, we don't even know what it is. Mm-hmm. And we don't know how we're having this conversation.
Right.
And so in a way, I think of consciousness as a kind of superpower that we've got access to, but we don't have access to an owner's manual that would tell us how actually the damn thing works, how to use it to the best of our abilities, please. How to yeah, we know when people have relationships with their pets and they feel a psychic connection to their pet. Well, yeah, it's emotional, but there's something about our conscious mind and that animal's conscious mind that it syncs up in a way that isn't just habit. It's not just habit, rote and habited. It's not. There's something else happening. Great relationships where people anticipate each other's thoughts. There's something else happening under the hood, as it were. That there's something really super powerful.
Yeah. And
about this thing.
I think for sure, and I think that's, as you were talking about that we don't have an owner's manual for it, it's like, I do think that that's one of the things that aspects of different religions have at least
and attempt to be that owner's manual.
Yeah, and the practices of those religions are attempts to find a way to work with the consciousness and in a way that actually results in good, because I think there is definitely an awareness of that consciousness, whatever it is, can really go awry. It can really become a problem, and it combined with the individual human is so powerful that if it's really screwed up, it can cause all sorts of havoc. Whereas if you figure out a way to work with it, it can also produce good. And I think psychology is another set of experiments with that. Like, how do we work this thing, whatever it is? And how do we exercise the demons that people have, whatever language you use for that?
Religion's goal should be how to be a better owner's manual.
I think I would think that there'd be, my guess, I would say that in many ways, Christianity is you could say it's an owner's manual of a particular kind to life, and a great way to, take it on a test run. If you want to try it out, it's like, take it on a test run, see what you think. But there are a lot of people that have found that it has been helpful, that would say that they've lived a better life with it than they would have without it. So I just thought of one thing. This is a random thought, but I just want to throw it in here. There's in Proverbs, it says that the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. And it's gotten a lot of flack from people that feel like you're supposed to be scared of God, is what it's saying. But what dawned on me is, as we were talking here, is I've actually got a new frame for thinking about that, which is, I think that's the way that it's like the way that you inoculate yourself against you and God becoming the same thing, that we're all on track and in sync and I can justify anything that I do. The fear of God is more of this recognition. Again, this is going down a theist path, but it's a recognition that this God we're talking about is way more than we are, is interested in a lot of other things besides us, and is something, something that it's not a one-on-one relationship. It's not either equal or we're the same or any of that, but that this is a different kind of being that I'm in relationship with. And if I'm going to live a smart life, it begins with me saying, I'm not God, God's not me, and there's this other thing. Now, the reason I think that's I think that's helpful because of some of the conversations we've had here, that if somebody's going to go the theist path, one of the early things you need to figure out is you're not God.
Well, that would help.
Wouldn't that help? I mean, to me, and that's why this is like a big aha for me. I don't know if but like the fear of God as the beginning or the first step in wisdom, it's like, to me, that makes sense. If you're going to go the theist path, start with you're not God, and you're a part of this huge story that you're just one little part of. Start there and go from there, and you're going to save yourself from all sorts of landmines on this theist path by starting with the fear of God, which doesn't mean that you cower before God. It means that you recognize that God is a being other than you and much greater and beyond. Let's say God is a being beyond you.
Ultimately,
anyway,
the place where one needs to be is where one is at peace with one's consciousness and one's conscience. It makes me think we should do a whole podcast on the difference between consciousness and conscience and how the two intermingle. It's
right, because we've just gone back and forth between those as we've talked, really. But you're right, they're
one definitely is such a vital part of the other, and depending upon where you sit, if there is a deity as part of this relationship, yes, it goes right to the thrust of the question that we started this an hour already.
That's right.
Which really is,
wait, one more statement. This will just lead into a future conversation.
Oh, surely.
Because to me, I would say that consciousness is mine as a theist and will never not be mine, or I wouldn't give that's just part of the stuff I work with. Conscience, to me, a big part of being a Christian theist is that my conscience internal to me is now majorly up for question, because there's a different conscience that is guiding and directing me as I move forward. So that would be one distinction, but I think that'd be a great conversation.
Let's sum it up this way. I think maybe this is the best way to put it.
Yeah, go for it.
In your case, the voices inside your head are mostly yours, but one of them isn't. And in my case, all the voices inside my head, it's just me.
Mm-hmm. That's right. No, I think that's fair. I mean,
and on that bombshell.
Yeah. On that bombshell.
That just means I'm schizophrenic and you're not, and you're less so.
Well, some people do that differently, but but here's the thing: we're both making it work in our lives, right? So.
There you go. Yes. Hey, are you happy?
Yes. I think I could be happier, but I'm happy enough for now.
Well, hey, there you go. That's a lot of the battle fought. Hey, and I hope all of you out in the audience are happy too, and we're happy that you joined us and join us next time. And
just keep thinking, because there's a lot going on in your head out there. Okay, and just kind of decide, how do I do this? What is that? What are the voices in my head? And we'll talk more. So
indeed, and whose are they? We'll see you next time.
That's right.